There's a new proposal backed by Google and Microsoft that could be shaping the future of how we use the web, and I kind of like it. It's called WebMCP, but don't get that confused for a normal MCP server. Instead, WebMCP is actually a browser API, and it will let front-end developers expose features of their sites as tools to AI agents, essentially letting every site become a mini MCP server. And while you may have already seen some sites start to offer their own MCP servers already, this is a little bit different. Its goal is to actually help agents use the website for you instead of just accessing your APIs and showing that in a chat. It'll be entirely front-end based. Now, if that distinction does sound a little confusing, let's just jump in and see a demo and talk about why I like it. Now, the first thing I want to admit is this demo isn't going to look too exciting, but that's kind of the point of WebMCP. It's taking something that's already possible, but just making it way better. So stick with me on this. What I have here is I have the Canary version of Chrome that they're testing this proposal in, and also a site that's been set up with some WebMCP tools. You can see on the right I have an extension which is able to interact with these WebMCP tools, but imagine in the future this would just be your normal browser built-in AI, whether that's Gemini, ChatGPT Atlas, or whatever Arc has now turned into. You can see if I want to send a user prompt while I'm on this site here, saying that I want to book a round-trip flight for 2 people from London to New York on specific dates, and I hit send, it is going to take me to the search result page, so it is used the website for me. Wow, crazy stuff, right? Yeah, as I said, this demo was going to look very basic, but the key thing about WebMCP is how it used that site for me. The current approach to AI using websites tends to be using tools like Playwright, HTML parsing, or even taking screenshots of your site and trying to use it as a human. But all of that is pretty inefficient, especially token-wise, and it's still prone to a lot of errors. So this is what WebMCP is here to fix. WebMCP instead lets the developer of the website expose certain MCP tools that then interact with the client-side JavaScript. So that's all that's happening when an AI chooses to use one of these WebMCP tools. It's simply running a JavaScript function on your site that you, the developer, have set to run. So you can see on the example of this demo flight page, I have one WebMCP tool available called Search Flights, and you can see this takes in some input arguments like origin, destination, and trip type that matches one-to-one with the form that we have over here. But the crucial bit is the AI now knows that it can use this MCP tool. So when we hit send on a prompt like this, it's not going to fill in the form by doing anything like Playwright or HTML parsing. In fact, it doesn't need to know what the website looks like at all or what the HTML looks like either. It simply knows it has that WebMCP tool and it calls it with those input arguments. Then I, the developer, have set what happens when I take in those input arguments and I run a JavaScript function, which in this case simply updates the React state, and that causes a navigation to the search flight page. If we take a look at the front end code for this, it is incredibly simple and hopefully it will start to make a lot more sense. But you can see the first thing we need to do is register the WebMCP tools that are available for a given page. And we can do that by using window.navigator.modelContext. So this is the API that's going to need to be built into the browsers if this proposal passes, and it's currently in Chrome Canary so they can test this one out. You can see once we do have our model context API, we can register our tools by simply using the register tool function, and in this case, I'm registering the search flights tool that we saw being used earlier. If we check out what an actual tool is, you can see it's a very simple object definition. We have a name, we have a description, so this is passed to the AI so it knows when to use this tool, and we also have an input schema if we want to take in any arguments. In my case, I had things like origin, destination to match that form. You can see we also have some more context that we can give to the AI so it understands what those arguments should actually be. But the important part about a tool definition is the execute function. This is the client-side JavaScript that is going to run on your site when this MCP tool is used, so it can basically be anything that you want. In my case, I'm using the search flights function, and we don't have to worry about this implementation too much, but essentially all I'm doing is taking in the parameters that the AI has filled in for those input arguments, and I'm dispatching an event called search flights with those parameters. Then in my React code, all I'm doing is simply adding an event listener for that search flights event, and when we have that, I'm simply running the function handle search flights, and this is where we can essentially do anything that we can in React, and in my case, I'm taking in the parameters and just setting them as the search parameters, which cause the navigation. It really is that simple, and that's why I really like this approach, as not only is it incredibly token efficient, but it also allows me as the developer to define the interactions of the site, and the AI can follow my guardrails. It's just a really neat solution to building sites with both a human and an AI assistant in mind, instead of the current approach, which is to build a site for a human and then an MCP server for the AI, and if the AI then needs to use the website, well, you better hope it just figures it out somehow. It's also worth noting that these WebMCP tools aren't just useful for causing some event on your page, like a navigation or filling in a form, but they're also really useful when you need to parse information that's on the page. Say I, as the human, came in here now and started adjusting some of these filters, like I want a price less than $500 and a departure time before midday. There are still quite a lot of flights on this page, so I want AI to help me choose the best one. So I can say, what flight would you recommend on this page? Now, current approaches would simply use Playwright or HTML parsing to actually take in the entire page and try and understand the information here and turn it into some form of structured data, but we don't need to do that with WebMCP. Instead, I, as the developer, have simply set up a WebMCP tool called List Flights, and this has access to the current React state, so it has access to all of the information that's displayed to the user here, but in nice JSON format. So this way, if I do actually ask the AI for this prompt, you can see it calls that tool, lists out all of the flights that are currently showing on this page, and it gives us a recommendation here for flight 56. And I can find that flight showing on the page here. That process has used way less tokens and is going to be way more accurate. Now, the final thing I want to showcase is how you can actually take advantage of WebMCP with no JavaScript. Up until now, we've actually been using the Imperative API, which is where I, the developer, have written the JavaScript to handle the tool calls and also register specific tools. There's also a second approach called the Declarative API. This approach is much simpler as it's meant for the simple use case of filling in HTML forms. So you can see I have a very simple booking reservation one, and I can simply ask my AI to book me a table with some of the information that's needed to fill in the form, and it will go ahead and actually fill that form in for me. That's because it has access to a WebMCP tool called Book Table. But the important part here is I wrote no JavaScript to actually have access to this WebMCP tool. And that's because the way that the Declarative API of WebMCP works is you simply need to add in a tool name and a tool description attribute onto a HTML form, and the browser will then try to convert that form into a WebMCP tool for you, trying to understand what each of the inputs should be for the argument of the MCP tool. And we can see that here we have a tool name of book table on that booking form that we saw and a tool description, so the AI knows when to call it, and we simply have a normal HTML form. The only other difference is, in some of the inputs here, we also use the attribute tool param description to give the AI a bit more context on how it should fill in that information. But for the rest of it, the browser is going to pick up the input type, the input name, and use that to create the MCP tool. And we can see that back on our inspector here, where it's picked up that the input arguments are correctly name, phone, date, time, guest, seating, and requests. And it's done all of that just using simple HTML form logic with me writing zero JavaScript. That's pretty much all there is to the WebMCP proposal at the moment. And as I said, I'm pretty positive on this one. I like the way that it bridges the gap between web apps and AI agents, and it removes any of the guesswork when agents are trying to use a site. And it makes sure that any interactions are defined explicitly by the website's developers. Plus, I'm also not fully AI pilled yet. I like it when there's a tool that helps an AI agent work alongside me instead of replacing me. I don't like the idea of booking my flights or restaurants in ChatGPT's interface, and I much prefer going to the actual website myself in a browser, and if I want to, I can have the AI help me out on that page. It's a much better system at keeping a human in the loop and also allowing the website developers to define how that experience goes. But it's also worth remembering that this is just a proposal at the moment, so it might take some time to appear in the browsers, and there's also still some limitations that they need to deal with, like the classic one of security. There could be poison tools and descriptions on certain websites, so how much access is given to user information, and how much control will the browser AI have over the entire browser, so if one of these poison tools does go out of control, how much damage can it do? Hopefully they find an answer for that, as I'm pretty positive on this proposal. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. While you're there, subscribe, and as always, see you in the next one.